Cameron Smith says, hey, Bill, could you please dispel the myth that communism works so well on paper? So there we go with Bernie, right? Bernie is basically saying that communism works great on paper, but it just hasn't been done right. If you ask Bernie Sanders if he's a socialist, which I would love to do, he says he is, he claims he is, he runs as a socialist. He'd say, yes, I'm a socialist. Then the next thing I would do is start to ask Bernie about the 30 million people that socialism killed in Russia, and the 7, 8, 10, 12 million people killed by socialism in Germany, and 50 million people killed by socialism in China, and the 7 million people killed by socialism in Vietnam, and the 3 million people killed by socialism in Cambodia. And I would ask him about all these people killed by socialists. And then he would say something to the effect of, well, you don't understand. See, that's not real socialism. They just weren't doing it right. And then I would say, well, sir, here's what's remarkable about that is that they called themselves socialists. Hitler called himself a National Socialist. The communists called themselves the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics. The socialist people in Communist China, the People's Republic Army, it's all called themselves socialists. So since they all called themselves socialists and killed 100 million, 200 million people, you're calling yourself a socialist too. Number one, you wouldn't get me wearing a T-shirt that had the deaths of 100 million, 200 million people on it, no matter what I believed. But number two, you're going to have to tell us how your socialism is different. And he would talk about things like Sweden and so on. And I would say, well, Sweden is a fairy tale. Sweden doesn't exist. The idea of Sweden doesn't exist. Sweden is not an example of sustainable socialism because Sweden is not a socialist country in a vacuum. It is a socialist country, but the reason they can afford all of their health benefits and all their cradle-to-grave benefits and they can retire people at 50 and all this stuff is because they don't have to pay for defense against the giant Russian bear that is right at their doorstep. Sweden can be socialist because American taxpayers are paying for Sweden's defense. And if they had to put 3 aircraft carriers in the oceans, or 5, or whatever it took, and God knows how many number of air wings and armored divisions to protect themselves from the Russians, they wouldn't afford socialism, and neither could the French either, or the Germans or anybody else. The reason they got their socialism is because we bought it for them. We bought it for them. We paid for their defense. They don't have to. No one's paying for the Russian defense other than the Russians. The Russians are paying big money for their defense. You look at Russia. Russia is a country that has fallen apart and is falling apart, collapsing everywhere into alcoholism and economic ruin and cronyism and the worst form of banditry kind of capitalism. And all of this is tolerated because they have to keep buying gear. And that gear is designed to take territory. And the territory they would take are called places like Poland and Finland. And Finland is not that far from Sweden. And if you don't realize that the Russians would attack Finland or Poland, you might want to look all the way back 70 years in history and find out, no, that's exactly what they will do. So Bernie is a fraud. His economic system is a fraud, and it brings poverty to everybody. Bernie doesn't care that everybody's lives would get worse. Bernie just wants to be the guy who said everybody's equal. See, there's nobody better than you. We're all miserable together. We all live in mud huts, and none of us have electricity, and we die at 30 from parasites and diseases, but at least nobody's living 10 years longer than another guy. At least there's nobody living to be 90 instead of 85 because he makes more money than you do. We'll all just die at 30 and imagine the wondrous, glorious equality. The problem, which leads me into the question I really wanted to get to here. Communism works so well on paper. The idea that it's this perfect political system is just, unfortunately seems to select the murderers and put them in positions of power, and that seems to be what happens all the time. Maybe we want to give it a different try? No. So let's look at it on paper. What does communism say on paper? Communism says 2 things on paper that I think bear examination because they're both horrible, naked lies. The first lie of communism is that if it's a cold night out and we're in the plains of North Dakota, and it's 35 degrees below zero, and we hear bleating out in the barn, and it turns out that one of our cows is sick. The idea of socialism is that one of us will go out there at 4 o'clock in the morning and 30 degrees below zero to take care of a cow that doesn't belong to us. That we would, in fact, all pitch in and work for the collective as hard as we would work for ourselves. And it just ain't so. It ain't so. It's obviously not so. It's obvious to you. It's obvious to me. All of the history of the world shows it. When Lenin rides in on his train and gives his big speech, or Mao does the long march, or Stalin does his thing, or Hitler seizes power, with the annexation, all this other stuff. Hitler was a bohemian loser who would not hold a job. Thought he was a great artist. And he never gave up those work habits, by the way. Stalin was a failed seminary student filled with murderous rage. So was Hitler. So was Mao. All these people, they come to lead these movements, these people's movements. We're just a person of the people. We all believe in this shared socialism. Does Stalin and Lenin and Mao and Hitler and Molotov and Ribbentrop and Goebbels and Goering and Himmler and does Yeshov and all of these murderers in the collective system come to their capitals and then go back and work in the fields that they came from or the mines that they came from? No. In the people's paradise of the Soviet Union, where everybody was equal, everybody was equally miserable except for the 5% of the nomenklatura, which was a word that meant the nomenclature literally in the Soviet Union. If you were going to amount to anything, and I mean anything, like be a college professor, your name had to be on an approved list called the nomenklatura. And this 5% of the population that got into power by saying power to the people, to hell with ruling parties, had their own limousines, had their own private department stores where there was actual stuff on the shelves, went to their private dachas, their little cottages out on the lake, and they lived just like any other royalty. They lived like bloodline aristocracy, or they lived like rich capitalists. It is human nature. And when somebody tells you that we are all going to be equal and just turn over everything to me, that person is going to be as well set up as as a guy who handed out forms in Chicago, who was hired to be the president of a law review at a major institution, never wrote a single law review, who showed no signs of competence, no signs of brilliance, no sign really of political skill, but now travels the world in his own 747 and does nothing but golf because he told people that he was going to make things equal and different. And they believed him. See, I'd respect Barack Obama. I'd still hate him, but I would respect him if he was, in fact, this socialist community organizer who wanted to bring change to America. But he isn't. He didn't. He didn't do Obamacare, which, remember, his signature legal achievement was not passed by him, was passed by Nancy Pelosi. He hovered above it in case it went down, and when it didn't go down, he took credit for it. $1 billion spent on a website that didn't have a shopping cart, but his signature piece of legislation means the government forces people to pay insurance companies, which is what the progressives hate. They hate the idea of private insurance companies. Obamacare forces you to pay Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Humana, Kaiser. It forces you to pay corporations. That's his signature achievement in legislation, and it's because he doesn't care. If he actually cared, like I suspect Bernie Sanders cared, I'd be able to respect him as a person who I disagreed with vehemently and who was trying to destroy everything I love, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He wants to golf, man. Even that is so appalling to me, is that it's such a tawdry payoff. It's such a cheap payoff that, what this guy want? What does he want? What does Michelle want? Michelle wants to go and vacation on the south of France in places she could never, ever, 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 ever afford, ever, 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 on other people's dime. And she wants to mock them and insult them while she's doing it. And Barack Obama wants to play golf in Tony locations in Hawaii and hobnob with movie stars. It's so petty. It's so small. It's such a tiny, tiny, tiny little man and such a tiny little payoff. If I was going to be president for personal reasons, I'd be president for personal reasons of taking America into a place where I could afford to go to Mars. At least it'd be like, well, what are you doing this for? Oh, I just want to go to Mars. You're gonna basically bend the country to your will because you want that? Yep. That's a kind of a personal, selfish thing, isn't it, Bill Whittle? It is. Yep, it is. It's a selfish, personal, horrible thing, but at least we're going to another planet. We're not going to go play golf on some Hampton, links with, fourth generation Kennedys and, and fly in my big jet. It's just sad. It's just pathetic. So communism doesn't work well on paper because people will not go out and take care of somebody else's cow the way they'll go out and take care of their own cow. That's the human issue. And the larger issue is the philosophical issue. Socialism means essentially that everybody ends up with the same thing. I'm going to say it again because I say it 1,000 times. The most important argument in the world right now is the one of all the ones I ever make. This is the argument. There is no such thing as equality. There are two different kinds of equality, and they are mutually exclusive. When somebody talks to you about equality, you need to stop them right there and talk to them about what kind of equality are they talking about. Are they talking about equality of opportunity or equality of result? Equality under the law is real equality. Equality under the law says that the homeless person on the corner does not have to be subjected to laws, regulations, rules, or so on that Donald Trump doesn't have to be subjected to. It says if Donald Trump commits a murder, he should be investigated as thoroughly, prosecuted as enthusiastically, and punished as severely as a homeless person on the street. And I believe that with some exceptions, needless to say, that the rule of law is still pretty much equally enforced on America. But when you're talking about outcomes, when you're talking about things that have an outcome, like an economic equality, you have to ask, are we talking about equality of opportunity or equality of result? Equality of opportunity means everybody has the same chance. We don't have perfect equality of opportunity here. If I heard that somebody was being held back because they're black, I'd be outraged about that, and I would do what I had to make sure that didn't happen. Same as if they're held back because they're white or Asian or a woman or gay or whatever. Equality of opportunity means there's a starting line and everybody's toes are on that starting line. You don't get to start 30 yards forward if you're rich. You don't have to start 50 yards back if you're black. Equality of opportunity means everybody has the same chance. There's nothing you can do about how you enter the world, but what you come to do with the world is entirely up to you. So equality of opportunity means everybody has the same chance. Equality of result means that everybody crosses the finish line at the same time. And the problem with that is if you have 100 people, look, this is so simple. There's this argument 1,000 times. It's real easy. Take 100 people out of a football stadium, take them to the field. Just take 100 people, randomly pick them out of the football stadium, men, women, children, all of them. Put them down on one goal line and line them up. And then have a starter pistol and fire it. That's called equality of opportunity, and that's what I believe in. And tell them to run as fast as they can to the other goal line, 100-yard dash, right? And if you take 100 people out of a football stadium and you fire that starting gun, 100 people are going to run as fast as they can, and they will all cross the finish line differently. The fastest person in that 100 will cross the finish line first, and the slowest person in that 100 will cross the finish line last. Now, they all cross at different times. There's nothing equal about it, but there is a fundamental equality in that they both start from the same place, they have the same chance, and. This is the moral case for capitalism and the moral case for equality of opportunity. All of them are free to run as hard as they want to or not run at all. In other words, if you don't want to give it your best, if you want to slack your way through life, if you want to jog, if you want to walk, if you want to meander and loiter and make a pass at the cheerleaders on the sideline, you can. There's nobody with a gun or a whip making you run as fast as you want to. You run as fast as you want to. If you want to dawdle, well, then somebody's going to get even further ahead of you. That's your decision because you dawdled, right? And it means that you are running with the gifts that you've been given and you're doing your best, and everybody crosses as fast as they can, and the total average time, if you had everybody motivated to run, now think about this is important. If you were to take the total time, not the average time, I should say, the sum times of everybody's race, you add them all up, that will be the lowest combined time. In other words, that is how the race is run the fastest. Everybody goes fast as you can, boom. That's capitalism, that's equality of opportunity. Equality of result means they all want to have to cross the finish line at the same time. We don't want somebody to cross ahead of somebody else, you see, because that person might have more of a nice house or a nice car, and that would be unfair. So in order to be fair, we want everybody to cross the finish line at the same time, which means everybody makes more or less the same pay, everybody has more or less the same housing, everybody has more or less the same bus that they ride on because cars are evil, and so on and so on and so on, and we live in this perfect equality of result. That's a form of equality, it is. Everybody is equally rewarded at the end of the day or at the end of the race. What's the problem with this morally and physically? The moral problem with it is if you put those same 100 people from that football stadium on that same goal line and you fire that same starting gun so that they all have to cross at the exact same time on the other end, just think about this because it's very, very, very simple. Just look down on the field. What has to happen for them all to cross at the same time? Every single person in there, except for one, 99 people out of the 100 have to be held back by force because the race can only proceed at the race of the slowest runner. You cannot run faster than your best. So the person who is the slowest or goofing off the most will be the rate at which everybody has to finish, because everybody finishes equally, which means we all finish at the rate of the slowest runner. And that means not only do we get a slower result out of the race, a much slower result, not only do we get less actual achievement, which is distance over time, but it also means that to the other 99 people, they have to have a gun to their head, forcing them to do less than they can in the name of equality. It's evil. It's not fair. It's not just. It is not just that Ben Carson, who may have studied for 25 years of his life in order to save your daughter if she gets hit by a car, because he knows how to operate on her brain and save her life. It is not fair to Ben Carson for the work that he does and the amount of studying he's done and the amount of effort and time and dedication. He's never off the phone, ever. He's always on duty. There's always on call, these guys. It is not fair to him to be paid the same amount of money as a guy who hangs out in a 7-Eleven smoking doobies out back. It's not fair. It's wrong. It's evil. It's unjust and it's unfair, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. And if Ben Carson is in fact entitled to make more money for saving your daughter's life because he studied for 25 years and has incredible skill, then who gets to tell Ben Carson what he can spend his money on? We have to take that money away from him. If we take his money away from him, he never got the money. It's not his money. He's not rewarded for his efforts. It's evil. It's wrong. It's stupid. It means everybody suffers. Everybody panics. It means there are no brain surgeons. There's nothing but 7-Eleven clerks in a world like that. And this is what Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Party of the United States of America want to foist on the American people. And it's got to stop, because it's evil. It's evil. It's evil. It's evil. And it's wrong.